Welcome back to the Gentleman's Gazette. Today's video is all about how to button a suit jacket properly, including your vest and overcoat, and we also talk about why tie or your tuxedo. If you make an effort to dress up, you want to look your best. Now, sometimes if you button your suit the wrong way, it sends the signal, I don't know anything about conventions and how it's done and how it flatters me the most. Unfortunately, most people never ask why a rule is a certain way, and because of that, we decided to create the ultimate guide on how to properly button a suit jacket. Keep in mind that buttoning conventions have changed over time, and what you wore in 1901 is different than what you wear today. First, let's talk about the single button jacket. It's rare to see a single button jacket outside of evening wear, but it exists. Usually it has a peak lapel, sometimes a notch lapel, but when you have that and it's a two-piece suit or a combination with a jacket and pants, you simply button the button. When you sit, you unbutton it. If you wear it with a vest, maybe in a three-piece suit, you simply leave it unbuttoned. It doesn't matter if you stand or sit, it's just unbuttoned all the time. If you have a two-button, two-piece suit or jacket and pants, you simply button the top button when you stand and you open it up when you sit. Generally, it's a faux pas to button both buttons because it simply looks odd. Yes, it was something you would see in the 19-teens and the 1920s, but men's fashion has gone away from that. If you go back to the 60s, you can see JFK wearing suits with both buttons buttoned. However, they were way too low and it just make it look odd. To learn more about JFK's style, please check out this in-depth guide here. An exception to this rule is the paddock coat or paddock suit. Those paddock coats and suits were made to be worn on a horse, and so they had a center bend and much higher buttoning points, and because of that you could button both buttons. Basically, it was a three-button jacket with a button row simply left off. In this day and age, 99.99% of two-button single-breasted jackets are tailored so you only button the top button. That also means you should never just button the bottom button of the coat unless you have a paddock coat or suit with a lower button that is as high as your waist level. If you decide to wear an odd vest or a matching vest to make it a three-piece suit, you always leave the jacket unbuttoned. If you have a three-button, single-breasted jacket, things are even a little more complicated. On a simple jacket or a two-piece suit, you simply button the middle button or the top two buttons. Of course, that's only true when you stand, and when you sit, you unbutton your coat. Never just button the lowest button or the two lowest buttons, because that looks simply off. Likewise, don't button all three buttons because that makes you look closed off, and it's a style you would have seen sometimes in the 20s and in the 30s, but then suits are tailored differently. Modern suits are oftentimes not tailored in a way that you can button everything so it looks neat. If you button all three buttons, sometimes you get wavy wrinkles and it looks just bad. You should also stay clear of buttoning just the top button because that gives you a Victorian look and just looks odd because it exposes your tie and the shirt underneath the buttoning point and it leaves very little on top of the V shape. A somewhat unique style is a so-called 3-roll-2 jacket, which means it has three buttons, but the top button is rolled into the lapel. That way you see more of the shirt front and the V over the buttoning point, and basically it behaves like a two-button single-breasted jacket. In that case, you simply button the middle one, or it's the top button that is visible. If you wear a vest underneath, either an odd vest or a three-piece suit, again, leave it unbuttoned at all times. Yes, you can find vintage pictures where men would wear that, but in this day and age, it would just look odd. So what about 4- and 5-button single-breasted jackets? First of all, I don't recommend you wear them because they very quickly go in and out of fashion and it's just not a timeless classic style. If you still want to have a 4- or 5-button jacket, simply button the middle buttons, leaving the top and the bottom button undone. I strongly suggest you do not wear a vest or a waistcoat because those jackets are tailored so there's not much visible space for it. Now, if you look at double-breasted jackets, things get a little more tricky. Double-breasted simply means that you have two rows of buttons that are usually parallel to each other. The most simple version of a double-breasted jacket is the two-button jacket. It simply means you have one faux button and one that buttons that's visible in the front. Just like all double-breasted garments, chances are there's a button on the inside that makes sure that your lapels always look symmetrical and elegant. Just like a single-breasted 4- or 5-button coat, the two-button double-breasted coat is a very dated look that places you in the 80s. Fortunately, it's very uncomplicated to button it. You simply button it at all times and you leave it buttoned when you sit or when you stand. The 4-button double-breasted suit coat or jacket are a little more unusual, but much more mainstream and timeless and classic. Basically, you have 3 options. You can button just the top of the working buttons, you can button both, or just the bottom one. If you have a square or rectangular button shape, most suits today are only buttoned on the top one or on both. Traditionally, a double-breasted suit with peak lapels was more formal and all buttons were buttoned at all times. Only when you would sit would you unbutton the bottom one. Today, people like the sprezzatura and more casual look, and therefore they oftentimes leave the bottom button unbuttoned. However, sometimes you can also find 4-button double-breasted coat, especially in evening wear, where the top pair of buttons is spaced further apart, and because of that, you can only button them on the bottom button. The 6-button double-breasted jacket is probably the most popular and common style that you will find. Because there are 6 buttons, there are different ways to position those. A not so popular way to position the buttons is to have 2 parallel rows from the top to the bottom. If you have that kind of a coat or suit, you button either all 3 of them or the top 2. If you want to sit comfortably, you probably have to undo the bottom button. However, just like with any other double-breasted coat, you never unbutton it completely. The most common 6-button double-breasted silhouette is what I'm wearing here right now. It's basically 2 rows of buttons that are parallel with the top pair being spaced further apart. Creates a nice V shape that accentuates the male attractive silhouette. Traditionally, you'd button both of the bottom buttons for a very classic look. Now if you go to Italy, you'll rarely see a man who wears a double-breasted coat that is buttoned on both. Usually they button just the middle button. They like it because it's a more nonchalant look, and it's something that was really popularized by Lino from Albazar. If you have a very formal double-breasted suit, just like the one I'm wearing here right now, you can wear both, but the traditional look is probably a tad better and more accurate. Now for 6 and more button double-breasted jackets, it's very important that you pay attention how you button it on the inside and on the outside. Because if I button the middle button on the outside and the lower button on the inside, I get an asymmetrical look of my lapels, and most people can't pinpoint what's wrong with your outfit, but it just looks off. Because of that, most quality double-breasted suits will have 2 inside buttons. So if you decide to button just the lower button on the outside, you button just the lower one on the inside. If you decide to button just at the middle one on the outside, you can button either the top one or the top one and the bottom one, but you shouldn't mix it up. 8-button double-breasted jacket is very unusual and it provides a very maritime look, which is usually something you see only in a blazer. Prince Charles has one, for example, and he has been wearing it for years. In that case, the top row is spaced apart and he buttons the 3 button buttons below. Because you have so many buttons on your front, chances are you'll have to unbutton the bottom one or maybe the button 2 if you sit, depending on what makes you comfortable. Now that you know the proper buttoning rules for suits and jackets, let's talk about vests. Single-breasted vests are usually worn with a button undone. There are different theories about why that's the case. One references Bertie, who later became Edward VII, and he was so big that he simply couldn't button the bottom button, and because of that, other people adapted his style. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the different theories are, because it's just a custom that you can see all over the place. No matter if you wear a 3-piece suit with a matching vest or an odd vest, on the single-breasted vest, the bottom button is usually undone. The only exception to the rule is, for example, for evening wear, such as white tie single-breasted vests and black tie single-breasted vests. In that case, you button them all the way because it's a formal ensemble and a unbuttoned button would simply look off and too nonchalant and casual. On the other hand, if you have a double-breasted vest, the rules are simple. You simply have all buttons buttoned at all times. Some Italians leave the bottom button undone because they want to be casual and show some sprezzatura, but it just looks off because a double-breasted waistcoat is simply more formal than a single-breasted counterpart. Now, what about other garments? In a white tie ensemble, there's nothing to button, so you just leave it unbuttoned. On the other hand, with a black tie ensemble, it's a little different. If you have the traditional 1-button jacket, you leave it unbuttoned if you wear it with a waistcoat or a vest, and you button it if you wear it with a cummerbund. If you have a double-breasted dinner jacket or want to know more about black tie and how you button it properly, please check out this in-depth black tie guide. When it comes to overcoats, buttoning is fairly simple. Usually you have all the buttons buttoned simply because it's supposed to keep you warm. Yes, you have the option to leave the bottom button undone because that creates a little more range of movement and it allows a little more air in when it's not so cold outside. If you have a double-breasted overcoat with different inside buttons, you have to pay attention to the same things as you do with a suit. Don't button the bottom inside with the top outside or vice versa. It will just look off. I hope I didn't confuse you with all the different rules. This is just a great reference video, so whenever you're unsure about buttoning points, you can always come back to it. So bookmark it. In today's video, I'm wearing a double-breasted rope stripe suit from Ralph Lauren Purple Label. It is a 6-button configuration with the top pair being more spaced apart, which is the most common double-breasted silhouette. Because it's a more formal suit, I'm buttoning it on both, but I could easily also just button it on the middle one. The suit is paired with a red and white houndstooth bourrette tie from Fort Belvedere, which I designed myself. I go with a matching pocket square in white with red hand-rolled edges, which are an X-stitch, which is very difficult to achieve, but we found some Italian artisans who still can do that. The red and white goes well with the tie, as well as with the white shirt. It's a semi-spread collar with French cuffs, which are closed by simple sterling silver monkey fist cufflinks from Fort Belvedere. My shoes are double monk straps in a chocolate brown, and my socks are blue and red shadow stripe socks, likewise from Fort Belvedere. As always, you can find all of the Fort Belvedere accessories that I designed in our shop here. To break the simple color tones of blue, white and red, I'm wearing a pinky ring with a green malachite stone. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and to our free email newsletter so stuff like this comes right to your inbox.